Let's talk about rare earth elements, the secret sauce in your phone, laptop, and electric car. These are the unsung heroes of modern technology, quietly powering the devices you use every single day. Without them, your smartphone wouldn't vibrate, your laptop screen wouldn't shine, and electric cars would be a distant dream. They're hidden in plain sight, tucked inside the gadgets we can't live without. But these metals are also at the heart of a global standoff between the EU and China, with the war in Ukraine looming in the background. It's not just a trade dispute, it's a high-stakes chess game, where every move could shift the balance of power. The world is watching as these two giants negotiate, strategize, and sometimes clash over who gets access to these critical resources. Imagine if one country controlled 90% of the world's coffee and threatened to cut you off during a crisis. That's Europe's rare earth problem. The EU relies on imports for almost all its rare earth needs, making it vulnerable to sudden supply shocks. If China decides to tighten the tap, European industries could grind to a halt, and everyday life could be disrupted in ways we haven't seen before. The EU is realizing its green tech and defense industries are deeply dependent on China. From wind turbines spinning on the coast, to electric vehicles rolling off assembly lines, and even the advanced systems that protect European borders, rare earths are the backbone. This dependency is raising alarms among policymakers and business leaders alike. This isn't just about economics, it's about whether Europe can build the tech to fight climate change and support Ukraine. The ability to produce solar panels, batteries, and military equipment hinges on a steady supply of these elements. If that supply is threatened, so is Europe's ability to meet its climate goals and help allies in times of conflict. China, after decades of strategic planning, now controls the market and is flexing its power. Through investment, technology, and strict export controls, China has built a near monopoly, making it the gatekeeper for the world's rare earth supply. This dominance gives China significant leverage on the global stage. The EU is being forced to confront what happens when a vital supply chain is used as leverage. European leaders are scrambling to find alternatives, reopen old mines, and invest in recycling, but breaking free from this dependence won't be easy or quick. This conflict could impact the tech you use every day. Prices could rise, new gadgets might be delayed, and innovation could slow down if rare earth supplies are disrupted. The ripple effects would be felt from your pocket to the global economy. Today, as some celebrate independence, we're looking at a new kind of dependence, one that's invisible, but just as powerful. Our modern lives are tied to these tiny elements, and our freedom to innovate depends on securing them. In this episode, we'll explore what rare earths are, why China dominates, and how this trade dispute is tangled up with the war in Ukraine. We'll break down the science, the politics, and the real-world consequences for people everywhere. The fight for the 21st century might be decided by who controls these tiny, powerful elements. The outcome could shape not just the future of technology, but the future of peace and power around the world. Rare earth elements aren't actually rare, they're found all over the planet, scattered in the Earth's crust. But what makes them special is that they're rarely found in concentrations high enough to make extraction easy or cheap. Instead, they're mixed in with other minerals, making the process of separating and refining them both complicated and costly. There are 17 rare earth elements with names like neodymium, europium, and dysprosium. Each one has unique properties that make them essential for the technology we use every day. They might sound exotic, but you probably rely on them more than you realize. These elements power the tiny but powerful magnets in your headphones, create the vivid colors in your smartphone screen, and drive the high-performance motors in electric cars. Without them, many of the devices we take for granted simply wouldn't work as well, or at all. Wind turbines, electric vehicles, and even advanced medical equipment all rely on rare earths to function efficiently. They're the backbone of clean energy and modern healthcare technology. Without rare earths, our tech would be bulkier, slower, and far less efficient. Imagine carrying around a phone the size of a brick, or driving an electric car that can barely make it up a hill. The real issue isn't that rare earths are scarce in the ground, it's that extracting and refining them is incredibly difficult and comes with a heavy environmental cost. Mining operations can leave behind toxic waste, polluted water, and scarred landscapes. Because of these challenges, most Western countries decided to outsource this dirty and expensive work, shutting down their own mines and relying on imports instead. Only a handful of places were willing to take on the environmental risks. That's how China, with its vast resources and willingness to bear the environmental burden, became the world's rare earth powerhouse, controlling the majority of global supply. Today, the transition to a green economy, the production of solar panels, electric vehicle batteries, and even the most basic electronics all depend on these elements. Rare earths are the invisible foundation of our digital and green future, quietly enabling the technology that powers our lives and our cities. But there's a catch. Mining and refining rare earths is toxic, expensive, and produces hazardous waste that can linger for decades. Communities near mines often face serious health and environmental risks. Most countries didn't want to deal with the mess or the political fallout, so China stepped in and took over the industry, shaping the global supply chain. And that's where the story really begins. Because whoever controls rare earths controls the future of technology and the race for a greener world. For decades, China has poured vast resources into rare earth mining and even more crucially, into mastering the complex art of refining these elements. While other countries focused on extraction, China built a complete supply chain, from raw ore to high-purity materials essential for modern technology. Today, China dominates the rare earth market, controlling over 60% of global mining and nearly 90% of refining capacity. This near monopoly means that most of the world's smartphones, electric vehicles, and wind turbines rely on Chinese rare earths. This dominance gives Beijing enormous leverage. Imagine if one country owned the only oil refinery in the world. That's the kind of power China wields over rare earths, which are vital for countless high-tech industries. China has flexed this muscle before. In 2010, after a diplomatic dispute with Japan, Beijing abruptly halted rare earth shipments, sending shockwaves through global markets and exposing just how dependent the world had become. Now, China is tightening export controls once again, citing national security concerns. These new restrictions are raising alarms across the globe. To the EU and US, these moves look like economic coercion, targeting materials that are absolutely critical for green technologies, advanced electronics, and even military defense systems. These restrictions come at a time of rising geopolitical tensions over Taiwan, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and a global trade environment that's more uncertain than ever. By controlling the rare earth supply chain, China has the ability to disrupt entire industries worldwide, without ever firing a shot. Factories can grind to a halt, and supply chains can unravel overnight. For Europe, which imports nearly all its rare earth magnets from China, this dependence is a glaring vulnerability. Industries from automotive to renewable energy are at risk. The so-called Great Wall of Rare Earths has become a powerful tool of statecraft, shaping global politics and economics in ways few could have predicted. Europe is feeling the squeeze and scrambling for solutions. Governments and companies are racing to find alternative sources, invest in recycling, and develop new technologies to break free from China's grip. The stakes couldn't be higher. The world's technological future, and the balance of global power, may depend on who controls these critical elements. The EU has finally realized its rare earth dependency is a major threat. Enter the Critical Raw Materials Act. By 2030, the EU wants to mine, process, and recycle more of its own rare earths, and limit reliance on any one country. Fast-tracking mining and recycling projects and forging new partnerships are now top priorities. EU leaders are calling out China's weaponization of supply chains and linking rare earths to security and the war in Ukraine. The tone has shifted from polite trade talks to tense negotiations about sovereignty. The EU wants to de-risk, not decouple from China. But the era of naive optimism is over. Europe is demanding a more balanced relationship, where it isn't constantly at risk of a supply cutoff. The message strategic autonomy is now non-negotiable. The race to secure rare earths is on. Rare earths aren't just for gadgets, they're crucial for modern military hardware. Javelin missiles, radar systems, and drones all rely on rare earths for guidance, sensors, and motors. As Europe rearms and supplies Ukraine, it faces a chilling reality. Much of its defense supply chain runs through China. China's dominance gives it indirect leverage over the West's ability to support Ukraine. Any disruption in rare earth supply could cripple Europe's defense industry and Ukraine's war effort. The EU's trade talks with China are now inseparable from discussions about Ukraine. China's export restrictions on elements like gallium and germanium hit both tech and defense. The war in Ukraine has become a high-tech conflict powered by rare earths. Europe's vulnerability is now a matter of national security. The EU-China rare earth standoff is already affecting global industries and prices. European giants like Volkswagen and Siemens face uncertainty over rare earth supplies, threatening their green transition plans. Higher costs for rare earths mean higher prices for electric cars, wind power, and even consumer electronics. A policy shift in Beijing can raise the price of a toaster in Berlin. The EU and US are now friendshoring, building supply chains with trusted partners. Countries rich in raw materials are being courted by both sides, becoming new players in this global competition. The West is racing to develop alternatives, ramp up recycling, and reopen old mines. This isn't just about economics, it's about national security. The rare earth showdown is accelerating a shift to a more fragmented, competitive world. The era of carefree globalization is over. Europe's plan is threefold: mine more at home, build global partnerships, and recycle. Mining in Europe is back on the table, with a major deposit in Sweden offering hope, but production is years away. The EU is signing deals with countries like Canada, Chile, and Namibia to diversify supply. It's not just about buying raw materials, but co-investing in sustainable mining and processing. Urban mining, recycling rare earths from old electronics, is a key part of the strategy. The Critical Raw Materials Act pushes for advanced recycling to create a circular economy. These efforts face big challenges: local opposition, diplomatic complexity, and high costs. The EU is also investing in research to find substitutes and use less rare earths. It's a long-term, expensive gamble, but there's finally political will to act. The question: can Europe move fast enough? The clock is ticking. The world is watching. China sees things differently. Beijing says its export controls are defensive, a response to US and EU tech restrictions. China argues it's protecting national security and managing environmental damage from decades of mining. Chinese officials accuse the West of hypocrisy, happy to buy cheap rare earths, now upset when China asserts control. China is consolidating its rare earth industry, investing in new tech, and securing global supply lines through the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a global chess game, and China is protecting its queen. Publicly, China says it's just leveling the playing field, but both sides see the other's moves as provocative, deepening mistrust and division. Are we doomed? Not quite, but the era of easy globalization is over. The EU will keep building new supply chains, but it'll take years to reduce dependence on China. China must balance its power. Push too hard, and it could lose its customers for good. Expect more targeted restrictions, not a total cutoff. Negotiations will be tense, with Ukraine's war complicating everything. For consumers, expect more price swings and complex backstories for your gadgets. Recycling and circular economies will matter more than ever. There are no easy answers, just a web of economic, security, and political interests. Staying informed is key because these tiny elements shape the world's biggest power struggles. And next time you use your phone or toaster, remember, even the smallest parts can have global consequences.